Hello everybody and welcome to the Showcase, where we take a look at articles on Wookieepedia, the Star Wars wiki. Today on the Showcase we take a look at Beesar Tal-Apurna, so let's get started. Quote, "Oh please, Dr. Kisma Utterson has a wife and a whole brood of fanlings back on Chad who he'd do anything for, whose lives I guarantee can become miserable just like mine did when the Nile murdered my beloved wife, T-Mank." Beesar Tal-Apurna to Emmerich Captor and Cian Holt. Beesar Tal-Apurna was a Chadrifan female who married the Chadrifan T-Mank. After her wife was killed by Nile marauders during the Battle of Kur in 232 BBY, she grieved her spouse deeply. Fueled by resentment, Tal-Apurna agreed to spy on a Nile collaborator and doctor, Kisma Uttersond, for the Jedi Master Emmerich Captor to avenge T-Mank's death. While on the Outer Rim planet Chad in 230 BBY, the Chadrifan followed the Doctor and watched him interact with his family in their home. When Tal-Apurna's attempts to attach a tracking device to a Nile freighter were unsuccessful, she instead opted to board the vessel and relayed her location to Captor's droid, Q2. While aboard the ship, she wielded the Nile Storm Zagar's blaster against Uttersond and the criminal Erthab Fall to protect Captor, who became incapacitated upon encountering the nameless, force-eating creature aboard. However, when Fall attempted to kill her with his electrostaff, investigator Cian Holt saved Tal-Apurna, and the group fled the Nile freighter and traveled to the Starlight Beacon space station. After seeing the space station was under attack, Tal-Apurna threatened Uttersond until he agreed to share some details about the Nameless with them. Afterward, she boarded Starlight Beacon with her newfound colleagues. While there, she monitored the Doctor for Captor and eventually left the doomed station with several other escaping Jedi aboard Holt's ship. Biography. A loving wife. Quote, "I'll do whatever it takes." Beesar Tal-Apurna about avenging her wife. The Chadrifan female Beesar Tal-Apurna was married to the Chadrifan T-Mank for many years during the High Republic era. In 232 BBY, following the Great Hyperspace Disaster, T-Mank opted to join the fight against the Nile pirate organization plaguing the galaxy and signed up for the Republic Defense Coalition. The Chadrifan begged her not to go, but ultimately failed to change her wife's mind. At some point after joining, T-Mank learned how to fly a starship and taught Tal-Apurna some piloting techniques, though the latter remained relatively inexperienced. Tal-Apurna also learned of her wife's struggles while serving the Republic's coalition, including the coalition's opinion that she was too old to be of use and that Chadrifan did not need their republic. T-Mank died later that year in the Kur Nebula's Battle of Kur against the Nile when the marauders shot down her ship. Tal-Apurna was furious at the Nile when she passed away, grieving her wife's death deeply. The Chadrifan became miserable in her grief for some time afterward, reflecting on her failure to convince her wife not to serve in the coalition, and also on the years they had lost together. Not long after, the Jedi Master Emmerich Captor asked Tal-Apurna to spy on Kisma Uttersond, a Chadrifan Nile collaborator and doctor on the Outer Rim planet Chad. Tal-Apurna readily agreed, willing to do anything necessary in T-Mank's memory. Eventually, the Chadrifan, strengthened by the legacy of her wife's memory, came to empathize with T-Mank's decision to join the fight to protect her family. Over time, Tal-Apurna witnessed Uttersond's interactions with his family, realizing he cared about them deeply. Boarding a Nile freighter. Quote, "Dang thing won't stay on. How do these criffing trackers work anyway? No, it's taking off. Only one way this'll happen, but..." For T-Mank. Beesar Tal-Apurna infiltrating a Nile freighter. In 230 BBY, Tal-Apurna followed Uttersond to his home on Chad, hiding from view as he entered his residence. As she watched the Doctor interact with his family by peering through a window, the Chadrifan reflected on T-Mank's death and how that had led to her spying for Captor and the Republic's investigation. When Uttersond left his house and headed toward a shipyard, Tal-Apurna followed him there and attempted to attach a tracking device on the Nile freighter, becoming frustrated with it due to not understanding how it functioned. However, the vessel began to take off before she could firmly secure the technology into place. While considering that she was acting in memory of T-Mank's bravery, Tal-Apurna instead boarded the vessel via its landing gear and reported the ship's coordinates to Captor's droid, Q2, via comm. The Chadrifan then continued monitoring Uttersond, overhearing the Nile Storm Zagyar berating the Doctor for messing up their last transport and overhearing information about their reinforcements. Not long after, Captor arrived at the location leading a group of starfighters, engaging in a skirmish with the Nihil convoy present. The Jedi told his colleagues that their Republic contact was on one of the vessels and that he intended to board the ship. Confronting the enemy, quote, "Should have set it to kill, little rat." How do you change the setting? Too late. Blasters don't scare me anyway. Beesar, Tal-Apurna, and Erethab fall. Meanwhile, Tal-Apurna watched Zaggar confront Utterson, believing the Doctor had betrayed them to the Republic. As the vessel lurched when hit by a Republic starfighter, Zaggar's blaster clattered to the floor, and Tal-Apurna reached for it. However, after seeing the Doctor do the same, she slowly backed into her hiding spot again. Utterson used the blaster to kill Zaggar, ranting about how sick he was of encountering both Jedi and Nihil. After the Doctor had finished shooting at the Nihil Storm's body several times, the spy was horrified by the burning husk of a corpse sitting before them both. Moments after, when Captor boarded the vessel and ignited his lightsaber near Utterson, the Doctor opened the peephole of the freighter's containment area for one of the Nihil's force-draining, nameless creatures. The peephole's opening left the Jedi incoherent, causing his colleague, the investigator Cian Holt, to worry about him when he did not respond. As Utterson moved open the door between him and the Nameless, intending to kill the Jedi, Tal-Apurna grabbed Zaggar's weapon and held the Doctor at blaster point. Tal-Apurna hesitated to harm the Doctor, not wanting to harm a fellow Chadra-fan, and kept the weapon set to stun as she confronted him. Utterson asked her to be reasonable while indicating that the criminal Erethab Fall, with whom the Doctor had secretly been working to sell a Nameless with to leave the Nihil, would not share his same stance of not wanting to hurt her. As Fall approached behind Utterson, Tal-Apurna used the blaster to stun the Doctor, though Fall was left unaffected by the blast. When the spy struggled to change the setting on the weapon to kill to fire again, Fall teased that it was too late to do so and relished in her panic state. Fall knocked the item out of Tal-Apurna's hands and moved to kill her with an electrostaff of his own. However, Holt, who had followed Captor onto the ship, sliced off the Nihil's arm with the Jedi's lightsaber. Fleeing the freighter. Quote, "What's your name?" "Beesar Tal-Apurna. You saved me. Thank you. We're not out of this yet. I'll come back for Uttersond. Cian Holt and Beesar Tal-Apurna." Q2, who had arrived with Holt, insisted they needed to evacuate Captor from the Nihil freighter as Tal-Apurna closed the nearby peephole to the Nameless's crate, knowing Uttersond had said it was part of what affected the Jedi. The spy thanked Holt for saving her, telling the investigator her name. Though initially hesitant, having only received minimal piloting instruction from Teaming, Tal-Apurna agreed to fly Holt's ship, insisting she would do whatever was necessary to complete their objective. The group then fled the freighter, and Holt took Utterson captive. With Tal-Apurna piloting, they made their way to Starlight Beacon space station so that Captor could receive medical care. As they approached Starlight Beacon's location, Tal-Apurna was updated on the Jedi's condition and indicated they should arrive at their destination soon. However, the spy and Holt noticed shortly afterward that Starlight was under attack. The group resolved to question Utterson for answers, though the Doctor claimed he had no moral code and only wanted to acquire lots of money. Tal-Apurna became furious, telling those present about T-Mank's death due to denial and indicating the lives of Utterson's family could become similarly miserable if he did not cooperate. Falling Stars. Quote, "Beesar, keep a sharp eye on Utterson. Always, Master Emmerich." Emmerich Captor to Beesar Tal-Apurna as their group prepared to confront a Nameless on Starlight Beacon. Utterson relented and agreed to tell them what he knew, giving them a small piece of parchment with handwritten notes and telling them a few details about the Nameless and their force-eating capabilities. As the ship's passengers watched the space station before them, the Doctor indicated that Starlight Beacon was doomed, as his convoy had been due to be part of the second attack wave. Despite Utterson's protests as to its futility, Captor resolved to board the station, and Tal-Apurna joined her newfound colleagues. After crashing through the ceiling of the station's assembly room, the group encountered Jedi Master Torben Buck and a group of Jedi younglings who boarded Holt's ship to escape Starlight Beacon. Before they departed, Captor led a group to investigate a wounded Nameless Buck had encountered to learn more about them, instructing Tal-Apurna to monitor Utterson. Captor and Holt moved to the front of the group and neared the creature, but when it readied to attack, Utterson pushed Tal-Apurna aside and threw one of her thermal detonators at it. The Jedi and Chadra-fan were ambushed by a group of Nihil aboard, forcing them to flee back toward their ship. Captor bid farewell to Buck, fleeing the station with several younglings, the Jedi Knight Court, Holt, and Tal-Apurna. In the year afterward, Captor continued his investigations regarding the Nihil in the aftermath of Starlight Beacon's destruction. Personality and traits. Quote, "Stop right there, Doc. I don't want to hurt you. This is set to stun. Just stay back, and stop what you're doing. Now, a fellow Chadra eh? Let's be reasonable, good sister. Beesar Tal-Apurna and Kisma Uttersond. Beesar Tal-Apurna had white fur, black eyes, and pale skin. She was 1 meter, 3 feet 3 inches tall, and spoke Galactic Basic. By the time she served as a spy on Chad, the Chadrafan had an elderly appearance. The woman considered herself soft-spoken and felt she did not operate well under pressure. For many years, she and her wife maintained a deeply loving relationship. Upon T-Mank's death to the Nile, Tal-Apurna became extremely depressed while mourning her spouse's passing and her inability to prevent it. Despite not having previously cared about the Nile threat, her grief fueled her newfound strong resentment for the marauders. Though Tal-Apurna agreed to spy for the Republic in her wife's memory, she felt she was not adequately trained for the role and considered herself only a kindly old lady. The Chadrafan abhorred the violent way Uttersond killed Zagar and watched the Nile's corpse tearfully as it fell. While she did fire on Uttersond and Fall with the stun blast, she did not wish to hurt either and pleaded for them to stop what they were doing so she could assist captor. Whenever unsure of her capabilities, Tal-Apurna reminded herself of her wife's courage in fighting the Nile and resolved to do whatever necessary to end their presence in the galaxy. After seeing the Nile's attack on Starlight Beacon, the Chadrafan was willing to threaten Uttersond's family and wielded a blaster against the Doctor until he agreed to tell their group more about the nameless threat. Skills and abilities. Quote, "Can you pilot a ship? T-Mank taught me a few things. Yes. Cian Holt and Beesar Tal-Apurna." The Chadrafan was able to operate as a spy and remain undetected by Uttersond on Chad while surveying the Doctor's home. Despite her best efforts, she often struggled to use technology efficiently. By 2:30 BBY, Tal-Apurna had learned enough piloting knowledge to fly Holt's ship. Equipment. Quote, "Uttersond's ship. All I have to do is place the tracking device and I'll be done. I can go home." Beesar Tal-Apurna, after following Kisma Uttersond to a shipyard. While operating as a spy, Tal-Apurna wore a long-sleeved pale green shirt paired with gray pants and a lime green hood that had holes for her ears. She completed her outfit with a brown belt featuring several pouches and brown boots. At the Chad shipyard, Tal-Apurna attempted to attach a tracking device to Uttersond's ship. Despite the weapon being much larger than her, the Chadrafan wielded Zagar's blaster against Uttersond and Fall aboard a Nile freighter. She later threatened Uttersond aboard Holt's ship with a smaller blaster pistol that fit in her hand. While aboard Starlight Beacon, Tal-Apurna was armed with several thermal detonators in a silver-colored sling attached to her body across her shoulder. Behind the scenes. Quote,
"We get a lot of Uttersond, who I think is a fascinating character, and I wanted to build up his family life and his backstory stuff, but I also wanted a counterpoint to him and to get someone who's really invested in stopping the Nile and helping the Republic for her own personal family reasons, because her wife was killed in the Battle of Kerr."
Daniel Jose Older on Beesar Tal-Apurna's backstory. Beesar Tal-Apurna debuted and was first identified in the 4th issue of the Star Wars The High Republic Trail of Shadows comic book miniseries. The issue was written by Daniel Jose Older, published by Marvel Comics, and released on January 26, 2022, as part of the Star Wars The High Republic multimedia series Phase 1. Prior to the issue's release, a page depicting her was included in a StarWars.com preview for the issue on January 19th of that year. Older had initially alluded to Chadrafans appearing in the comic on Twitter on December 28, 2021. While being interviewed on Star Wars The High Republic show, Older indicated that Tal-Apurna was his favorite new character from Trail of Shadows and that he had enjoyed writing her. He was pleased he had gotten the opportunity to write more Chadrafan, as the author considered them an interesting species. Older explained that T-Mank's death fueled Tal-Apurna's strong motivations for defeating the Nile to avenge her wife, serving as a contrast to Uttersond's character arc of being a Nile collaborator in the series. In the same interview, Disney Lucasfilm Press's Michael Siglain said he felt Trail of Shadows' 4th issue was one of the best created for the High Republic initiative, especially given the installment's opening pages, which featured Uttersond and Tal-Apurna, were not centered around the miniseries' main characters of Captor and Holt. Thanks everyone for watching, and we hope you've enjoyed this video. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, this is Spooky Willow signing off, and may the Force be with you.